Hello and welcome to Legendary Lunacy. I'm your host, Jester Jack, and thank you for joining me today. This is the first video that we are posting. There's a group of us here trying to get our creativity onto the World Wide Web and make this our career. Um, our goal right now is to get at least one video out every day of October pertaining to the strange, dark, mysterious, creepy, spooky, and weird. Um, Now, since we're going to try and be getting a video out every day of October, it's probably going to be a little rough. Our videos might not be the prettiest, but I've been trying to do YouTube for a very long time, and I keep psyching myself out and putting everything off because I want everything to be perfect. And it's taken me until now to realize that um, sometimes perfect is tough. And if I continuously push things off until everything's perfect, then I might never actually do the things I want to do. So, starting out, we're going to do videos about movies, comic books, stories, anything pertaining to the horror, thriller, scary genres. Hopefully, at some point, maybe this month, I can invite my girlfriend, my other half, onto the channel, and she can tell us about some of what she does. She's a makeup artist for movies, stage, film, everything, really, and she's very talented. In fact, right now she's working on a look in this room, and it's very fun to watch her do what she does. Um, Now, once we get the month of October done, maybe we'll go on and do some other things. Not everything we have is horror. We just really like horror, and a lot of what we do does pertain to it. We do have some other like scripts for short films, stories, comic books, ideas that we've come up with and we want to produce that aren't horror related, but I guess we'll just burn that bridge when we get to it. um, so, without further ado, today what we're going to do is I've got some old short stories I wrote from my college days. They're both horror stories. One more than the other. We'll save that one for last. But I figured we'll go ahead and do a little reading because narration and like audiobooks is something I've always wanted to do as well. And if this is something you like, leave a like, a comment, whatever, subscribe, and let us know, and maybe I'll do more of these. It doesn't have to just be my writing. I could do narration of other projects or creepypastas and stuff like that. Just let us know what you think. So without further ado, this is a short story called Not Here. This is actually back from when I was in high school. We were given a prompt to write about what it would be like waking up somewhere that we were unfamiliar with, like an alien world or a bizarre alternate dimension. I could tell when I woke up something was wrong. I mean, waking up under a tree made entirely of flesh is kind of a big hint. I don't know what happened while I was sleeping, but I can tell you it didn't seem like reality. I stood up and immediately regretted it. I fell face first, hard and fast, to the rock-solid ground. I couldn't explain it, but I felt heavier. Like gravity was pulling down harder. And just then, all the contents of my stomach rushed up to my throat, and I could taste the stomach acids as they burned my tongue and the roof of my mouth, leaving a tingling sensation and a horrid flavor. Whatever was wrong with the gravity, my body was going to take a bit to get used to it. I could see a city-looking civilization off in the distance, so I mustered up all the strength I could find and slowly made my way to my feet. It felt like someone had strapped weights to my limbs, and I wasn't enjoying the feeling. One foot over the other, it took about 3 hours to make it down the mountain to the prairie below, and I judged it'd be another 2 hours before I got to the town. But that's when I started thinking. It had taken 3 hours to make it down the mountain, according to my watch at least, but the sun hadn't moved at all, and so I looked up to the sky to see where the sun was at, and that's when I lost control of my legs again, falling to the ground once more. Above me, the sun was center of the sky, and all around it I could see stars and planets. One of them seemed to be so close it was almost as if I could jump up and its gravitational pull would catch me and pull me in. This was unreal. Even if this was a dream, it seemed so realistic. I could feel the dirt in my hand. I could hear rustling and the roaring of engines and of car-type machines as it screeched to a halt nearby. Hell, I even felt fear when the beings threw a net around me and tossed me into the back of their car. I say beings because they were not human. Even though they looked physically identical, our skeletal systems must have been the same. Their skin, though, it was gray or damn near it. As if I'd seen... Well, I'd seen a few of both, gray and black. And when I say black, I mean like coal or darkness. The women were gray, had pointed ears, and purple irises in their eyes. And the men were tall and well-built, had red irises and fangs, and spoke in a harsh tongue that I didn't know. Of the group of my captures, there was 4. 2 were big, burly men who drove in the front of the automobile machine. 1 was smaller, more docile, who was reading a book close to the middle of the machine, and the 4th was a young woman who appeared around my age, 21 or 22 if I had to guess. She sat next to me in the entire trip, watching me. I'd have to admit, she was kind of cute. Oh god. I should have read this beforehand. My writing was horrible, and I'm about to talk about having a crush on an alien. Sorry, babe. She was kind of cute for an alien thing. She watched as the men opened my cage, put a tag on my neck, and let me go into the city. After the men had left, she came up to me and touched my hand. She explained that she could get information from skin-to-skin contact, and by holding hands, she can learn many things from me, including my name, Jeff Congrove, my age, 24, only 2 years older than her, apparently. And even my language. Apparently I'd also seen Teen Titans. She informs me I'm on the planet Klijnid. I took it all in and began observing the city. A man sat on a bench holding a small child. The child began to cry, and then he smacked it, as if he was scolding the young boy for crying. The child began to cry worse, and the man continued his punishment. Oh, come on. I turned away, not being able to bear the sight of it anymore. Next, I saw a woman selling random animals from a cart. A young boy bought a cat-like animal, began walking with it. An older woman bought a small rodent and dropped it into her mouth alive. I glanced over and saw a parent giving children coins for a candy machine. A girl put a quarter into a gumball machine, and a human tooth popped out, and she nonchalantly popped it in her mouth like a jawbreaker. The first girl, known as Nat, looked at me and asked where I was from. I looked around, completely lost, desperate, and defeated, and said, "Not here." Okay, I have not read that story in a while, and I am not pleased. I don't like my old work. I would probably give that a C. I don't think that was my best work, and it looks like the teacher did not care for it too much. I mean, she didn't give me a bad grade, but originally the title was called The Unfortunate Journey of Jeff Congrove, and she said, make it a shorter title. How about Not From Here? And that's what I ended up going with. And I think it worked better. Not From Here is a better title for that. You can definitely see, that was from 2013, you can definitely see that I was a lot younger when I wrote that. I was very, very goofy in some parts. Yeah. So that's that one. Let's go ahead and get on to the next one. This is a story called Blazing Emeralds. This one came from several years later. This is from when I was in college. So Blazing Emeralds, there was an old abandoned school around the city where I lived. And I got in trouble once because I didn't realize it was private property. I thought it was just condemned property. And so I was walking around exploring it one day and got in trouble. And the cops were called because I didn't know you were not supposed to go in there. But we talked everything out and we're good now. But it was a very scary experience. And the old building was very decrepit and run down, had been abandoned for years for the most part. So I was given the project for English Comp was we had to write a short story about somewhere we'd been that nowhere else, like not many people had been. And so I used that as the location and wrote a horror story about it. So Blazing Emeralds is a horror story about an old abandoned school that has since been torn down. But hope you enjoy. The raindrops pelted the squad car's windows like rocks as the storm grew stronger and their speed accelerated. Officer Malugin sat behind the wheel, sipping at his coffee, while Officer Wilson sat in the passenger seat, nervously looking out the windows. The duo was responding to a call about an old schoolhouse on the edge of town. According to the person who had called in, screams were coming from inside. Malugin had noticed Wilson shuddering in the passenger seat and shot a quick glance at his rookie partner. "You okay, kid?" he asked, returning his eyes to the road ahead. Wilson nodded, clearly embarrassed. "Yeah, I'm fine. Have you heard much about this old school?" Wilson inquired. Malugin thought a moment, then shrugged. "Not really, I guess," he responded. "They said after it closed down, weird shit started happening. It started small, like stray cats and dogs, and suddenly there weren't any. Then it was family pets. Folks would let them out to pee or do their business, and then they just wouldn't come back. Families would go looking, and they would just find the collars, or worse, all leading up to the old schoolhouse. It reached a head when a kid, some 10-year-old goddamn kid, went looking for his dog one night, and he found the collar by the front door of the school, and he went inside to find him. The kid never came out. He's still missing. They say..." Wilson was cut off by Malugin's gruff laughter. The sudden burst of sound had caught Wilson by surprise. Malugin's laugh slowly turned into a fit of coughing, and then a chuckle. Once he had regained his composure, he took a sip of his coffee and then turned to the young partner. You can't tell me you actually believe this bullshit, kid, right?" Wilson was somewhat flustered. He nodded. "Why shouldn't I?" "Because it's absolute load of crap," Malugin responded, exasperated. "It's clearly just a collection of stories that parents made up to frighten their kids into listening to their parents." Wilson turned his face towards the window, angry for making a fool of himself, but frustrated that Malugin would be so nonchalantly brave about something that frightened him so much as a child. "Well, I don't know, man. My mom always told me that her friend's sister was the one whose kid disappeared. You believe what you want, okay, Malugin?" Wilson stared grumpily out the rain-streaked window, and that's when he saw it. Venora School Building. On a sunny day, the school had a sort of air around it that would give even a brave man chills. The shattered window panes, barbed wire fence, and the blockaded front door are all unsettling enough without the help of heavy thunderstorm rain brewing overhead. As they drew nearer, Wilson could see that the emergency door on the side of the building had been broken open. He gulped. He couldn't be for sure from this far away, but he could have sworn there was someone in the doorway watching them. "Oh my God," Malugin muttered, snapping Wilson's attention as they slowly approached the building. Wilson looked around for what had caught Malugin's eye, and after a few moments, he saw it. A car was parked off in the ditch, having been abandoned in the heavy rain, apparently. However, what had caught his eye first was what was likely had caught Malugin's eye and caused his outburst. There, sitting in the middle of the muddy road, overturned and just being pelted with rain, was a baby's car seat. Wilson slowly shook his head in disbelief. It wasn't until Malugin spoke into the radio that he finally regained his composure. "This is Officer Malugin reporting from Venora School Building, responding to a 213. Looks like there might be a child on scene. Be advised, Officer Wilson and I will proceed with our sweep of the house. We'll keep you posted." Malugin clipped the radio back onto the slot on the dashboard and turned to Wilson. "All right, kid. It's going to be a piece of cake. Nothing to worry about. You ready?" Wilson looked at his senior officer. He couldn't have been too much older than himself, maybe 5 or 6 years at most. He knew Malugin didn't believe in the old stories, but he also knew Malugin couldn't do this alone. Wilson nodded. Malugin smiled, and the two stepped out of the car. Raindrops the size of bullets began pelting the duo immediately as they stepped out of the car into the rain. They also noticed that they could hear something muffled coming from the building. Even over the sound of heavy rain, they knew it was screaming and crying. Malugin rushed over to the car seat, turning it upright and checking it. "Nothing! The car seat's empty!" he shouted over the heavy rain and screaming. Wilson and Malugin stepped across the flattened fence and closer towards the building when a loud bang shook them to their core. They flattened against the walls on either side of the door and drew their 9mm pistols from their hips. They didn't know where the sound had come from, but they didn't know what the sound had come from, but they weren't about to take any chances. Malugin and Wilson met each other's eyes, and Malugin nodded. They drew their flashlights with their open hands, and Malugin peeked around the doorway. "Clear," he whispered to Wilson, and slowly stepped through the doorway, followed by Wilson. The minute they stepped through the doorway, the screaming had suddenly silenced. Malugin and Wilson shone their lights across the room. They entered slowly, checking thoroughly to make sure they wouldn't be mauled by something or someone. And after a few seconds, they were sure they weren't being watched in the small room and proceeded to the next doorway. The door opened with a loud creak as the officers peered through the door. Something small quickly skittered across the floor and out the door across from them. Malugin's grip on his gun and flashlight tightened as he brought the gun up to aim. "Greensville Police Department. Let me see your hands." Silence followed. Silence that seemed to penetrate their eardrums. They stepped cautiously through the doorway that the small creature had just fled through, which led to a forsaken gym. They scoured the room with their flashlights, finding nothing but a large gymnasium at first. They'd begun to move back towards the kitchen when they saw it. To the left of the kitchen was a hallway that led to the old classrooms and offices of the building. However, standing in the doorframe was something that could only be truly described as nightmarish. Its long, thin limbs and very thin, long fingers seemed to be nothing but bone covered in tight, black, leathery skin, which covered it from head to toe, save for its face and head. The most terrifying part had to be its face, which was stark white. The scalp was covered in what appeared to be deep scratches. The mouth appeared to be tattered, as if someone had tried cutting a mouth hole out of a piece of cloth. The bottom of its neck seemed to be sewn into its leathery flesh, like the whole face was some sadistic mask from hell. And the eyes... oh, the eyes struck fear into the officers instantly. They glowed a deep green, like emeralds ablaze. Wilson trembled in fear, but he did not lower his gun. Malugin stood his ground, petrified of the demon that stood mere 25 feet away from them. It moved, slowly, pointing at something. And when it did, Wilson nearly pissed himself. It was jolty, as if the tendons of what muscles remained on the beast weren't sure exactly how to work anymore. The officers followed the direction of the beast pointing. The door. "What the hell is it trying to say to us?" Wilson whispered panically. Malugin stared blankly at the door. I don't know, kid," he whispered as he turned back to the beast. And much to his surprise and horror, the thing was gone. The two officers steadied their handguns. We can't let that thing get out of here. We've got to find whoever owned that car and get them. Wilson, you with me, man?" Malugin asked, but Wilson looked around the gym, waiting for the demon to pop up at any moment, anywhere. Malugin continued. I understand. It's okay, kid. Go outside and call for backup. Get something and shoot anything that walks out that door that ain't me or with me. Okay?" Wilson looked at him. "I can't leave you to do this on your own," he said weakly. He nodded and added, "Let's do this, all right?" The partners nodded and drew their guns, starting towards the hallway. They began to hear something, very muffled. As they proceeded through the doorway where the demon once stood, they peeked their heads around the corner, aiming their flashlights around the hallway. The first thing they saw were the walls. They were lined with pet collars. Big, small, cat, dog, anything you can really think of had a collar, that could have a collar, was hanging on one of these walls. Wilson quickened his pace to catch up to Malugin, then whispered in his ear, "I told you so, Dick." Even staring death and danger in the face, Malugin couldn't help but chuckle at the joke. They rounded the corner to the large hallway, and the muffled sound they had heard became more clear. It was crying, and whoever was crying sounded young. "Shit," Malugin muttered to himself. They inched their way down the hall towards the last open door, from which the crying seemed to be coming from. Wilson's hand shook, Melugin slowed and nodded at him, trying to silently calm him down. While they sat calming themselves, a sickening shh came from the room at the end of the hall. Melugin led the way. He got to the doorway and nodded at Wilson, who positioned himself at the opposite side. The crying and squealing sound was mortifying, but off, as if not a normal baby crying. Melugin shook his head and kicked the door open, thrusting his gun forward and aiming at nothing. There wasn't a living thing standing or sitting anywhere in the room. There was, however, remains everywhere. Bodies, bones, splinters of bones, a huge mound in the corner that reeked of rotted flesh and insides, halfway decomposed, skinned and gutted corpses hanging in crucified positions from the walls and the ceiling. One lay in the middle of the room, freshly gutted and seemingly skinned alive. Wilson threw up on the wall. Melugin did the same out in the hall, and as Melugin regained himself, he peeked back into the room. He and Wilson locked eyes just as the squealing and crying started up again. The officers turned their attention to the corner of the room where a large wooden barrel was sitting. The sound seemed to be emanating from it, very faintly though. Melugin could hear laughter, coming from the same barrel. Wilson thought for a moment, then with a deep breath began forwards towards the barrel. "What are you doing?" Melugin asked in a sharp whisper. Wilson didn't respond to him. "What the fuck are you doing? Can't you hear the laughter?" Melugin was fighting to keep his voice from breaking into a full-on scream. Wilson looked back at him confused, but he didn't stop his slow creep towards the barrel. "What the hell are you talking about? All I hear is a baby crying." Melugin could hear the laughter growing while the crying seemed to fade or distort itself into something different, something maniacal and hungry. Wilson was steps from the barrel now, and to Melugin it sounded as if someone was just squatting inside the barrel, laughing like a damn madman. Wilson reached forward and gripped the edges of the barrel and slowly peeked inside. His face seemed to fall, and his eyes, as they peered inside, Melugin watched in horror, but not knowing what would happen next. "It's empty," Wilson said calmly, turning back to Melugin. But Melugin wasn't watching Wilson anymore. He was frozen into his position by the door in terror. On the wall, or in the wall, behind Wilson, was the very skinny silhouette. It had black, charred-looking body and a pale face and glowing emerald eyes. When it opened its mouth, row after row of jagged teeth were visible to Melugin. He tried to say something, but nothing came out of his mouth. He couldn't even speak when the creature stepped out of the wall and into reality behind Wilson. "What?" Wilson questioned as he slowly turned towards the beast. In a flash, the creature had gripped Wilson by the throat, lifting him into the air, high above the ground. Wilson choked, fighting to find breath that wasn't there. Melugin finally found himself. He drew a bead on the creature with his 9mm and fired 3 shots in tight groupings, right into the thing's chest. Bam! 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 Melugin could see black, chunky blood splatter the wall behind it, but it didn't seem to even slow it down. Melugin stepped forward, but before he could do anything, the demon took hold of Wilson's leg, and with a firm grip on both halves of his body, yanked hard. A sickening pop was followed by a squishy-sounding shlick as Wilson's head was torn from his body. The creature laughed as it threw the head at the petrified Melugin. It hit him with such force that he fell back into the wall, dropping his flashlight. Covered in blood and cuts, he looked at the ground for his flashlight, only to see it had fallen, aimed at the head of Wilson. Wilson blinked. Melugin stumbled to his feet as he heard scuttling coming across the room towards the hall, towards him. He didn't have his flashlight. He didn't know the exact way out, but he didn't care. He had let his partner down. Now he just wanted to get the hell out. Find something bigger, a bigger weapon. Come back with more people and blow this thing to hell in a handbag. He reached a fork in the hallway, not remembering which way he'd come. One way would lead out, and the other he didn't know. The scuttling was getting closer, so he chose in a flash. Right. Correct. It was the right way. There was the gymnasium. As he hurriedly stumbled into the large gymnasium, the sound of rain pelting the roof returned to his ears, and he noticed something above the door leading to the kitchen. A note. A warning. Hell's Lobby. God forgive those who enter. Scuttling behind Melugin made him turn around. The creature was about a yard behind him. He quickly fired 2 shots into it, the third missing. The first two, however, seemed to knock it back, stunning it. This gave Melugin enough time to bolt through the door behind him and lock it. No sooner had he done this, he began to hear scratching and clawing at the door. He hurried through and bolted the next door as well, and then the next. Just as he locked the last door, he heard the splintering of wood from the first one as the creature burst into the kitchen. He had no time to waste. He stumbled through the mud and the rain towards the squad car with the flashing lights. He flung the door open and grabbed the radio. "Hello, this is Officer Melugin requesting immediate assistance. Officer down, and I'm in dire need here. Can anyone help?" he shouted. There was silence on the other end for just a moment, and then static as someone spoke. "Hello, Alexander. No one's coming." The voice on the other end was rough, raspy, and older than he expected. It continued. "When you stepped into my little haven here, you lost all contact with the outside. This is your eternity now." Melugin shook his head in disbelief, then looked up at the school building. He could see through the kitchen window that there was a silhouette watching him. The glowing green emeralds gave it away. He dropped the radio and stumbled to the trunk, popped it open. He could hear something slamming itself against the final locked door as he pulled the shotgun out of the trunk and began loading shells into it. After it was loaded, he cocked it and walked towards the front of the car, facing the now cracking kitchen door. He aimed as the soft boom, boom, boom of the creature continued. He tensed a little, waiting for the final burst. He closed his eyes, uttering a little prayer to himself as the booming continued. "God, please help me. Please give me the strength to end this," he thought to himself. And suddenly, a voice right behind him, right in his ear, chuckled. "He can't hear you here," it said. Yeah, that's Blazing Emeralds. I think that might be one of my favorite short stories I've written. Is it perfect? No. I definitely think there's some more work I could do on it. That was one of the first papers I wrote for college, I believe. And I just remember really wanting to do a good job, so my comp professor would see my skills as a writer. So interesting fact about the story, Melugin and Wilson are actually the last names of 2 of my friends from high school. I remember I think I just seen them when I was writing the paper, because they'd gone off to do college in their own places and whatnot, and I just thought it was really cool to, like, I was like, "Hey, I'll put you in this story," and I was like, "Is that alright if I use your names?" They're like, "Yeah, it's fine, it's not a big deal," because it's just a college paper, it's not getting published or anything, but yeah, is it a little much in some spots? Yeah, I think it's a little rough. But I mean, I think I can always improve. I can always do better. What do you think, babe?
I have an earbud in my ear, so I couldn't actually hear you.
She said it was the best story she's ever heard.
Okay. I wasn't sure that I was supposed to be listening to you. I'm sorry.
You're good. I was just kidding. I was just teasing. But yeah, so that's. I don't know. I think it'd be fun to film that. I have to find a new place to film it because the building got torn down. But I think it'd be a cool little horror short, like a short film. One thing I thought about doing is I've got a bunch of starts of stories, like a bunch of stories I've gotten 2 or 3 pages in, and then I just don't know where to go with it or how to, like, extend it into a bigger thing. But I've thought about doing, like, a horror anthology, like a collection of a bunch of short stories, and I think that might be kind of fun. I don't know. I think it'd be kind of interesting to do. But, well, that's going to wrap it up for us today. It's the 1st of October, and a couple more hours left in the day. But I'm tired. We had a performance today at the other show we're doing. And so, hopefully, I'll have another video for you tomorrow. Probably won't be this long. I don't know what we'll talk about tomorrow, but we'll see what it is. Happy Halloween month, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I think I have 11 subscribers right now. So for you, and I think one of those actually might be some people who used to be on this channel. So if you see this video, thank you very much for tuning in. Share it. Um, I'll try and find some more old short stories and stuff that I've written, and we'll go from there. But yes, please keep your ear to the ground. We'll have all kinds of ideas and stuff soon. Have more stuff coming out. But I guess until next time, thank you. We love you. And embrace the darkness around you. That sounds really creepy, but I mean, we're creepy people. Look what I'm wearing. Well, have a good night, everybody. Sweet dreams.